Welcome to the kbbreview podcast. I'm Andy Davies, and Trevor, Justine, Nick and Liz PJ are all here for this week's very timely episode as we're talking about contingency plans. When a key supplier suddenly goes bust or runs into serious supply chain trouble, it can throw even the best run business into chaos. How do you keep projects on track, manage your customers' expectations, and find reliable alternatives without losing your sanity or your profit margin? And once the short-term issues are over, what lessons are there to learn about resilience, relationships, and not putting all your eggs in one supplier basket, if you can picture such a thing? But first, we're now less than a month away from the closing date for entries into the KBB Review Retail and Design Awards 2026. Yes, we're calling last orders on Thursday, November the 13th, but that still gives you plenty of time to sort your entries out. We've got categories for design projects, the best retailers and showrooms, new businesses, unsung heroes, rising stars, and the best installers and supplier teams. It's totally free to enter as always, and you can find out everything you need to know at kbbreview.com/awards. And that link is in the episode description. Good luck. And here is Trevor Scott from RFK and Rugby. Hello, Trevor.
Good morning.
We've got Justine Bullock from the Tap End near Cardiff. Hello, Justine.
Hello, hi.
We've got Liz PJ from Lima Kitchens in Milton Keynes. Hello, Liz.
Hiya.
And we've got Nick Warrington from Stuart J Warrington in Macclesfield. Hello, Nick.
Hi, Andy.
Now, the most important thing I need to work out, Nick, is what does the J stand for? Because I've said this every week now, and I don't know what the J stands for.
It's James.
Okay, that's a boring answer. That's not an interesting answer.
Sorry.
Nick. I'm really sorry, mate.
It's a bit of a family name. It's a bit of a family name, so it's sort of carried down the tree.
Oh,
so, yeah.
I was hoping like it could be Joker or something. Okay, so we're going to talk contingency plans, and let's be upfront about it. This topic has been triggered by the very sad news at the end of last week that Waterline has gone into administration after a few weeks of uncertainty and upheaval. Now, we're recording this on Monday, the 13th, so there may have been a few twists and turns before this gets published on Thursday. But as it stands, Waterline has ceased trading. They're not taking orders, and as far as we know, not delivering any existing orders. Its sister company, Crown, says that for them, it's business as usual, albeit with a new direct ordering and delivery process. So we're not going to talk about Waterline specifically, but it is, unfortunately, an all too raw example of a supplier being able to fulfill orders. So, Trevor, let's start with you because you're I keep calling you a veteran. I need a less insulting word for that, don't I? That you've been doing this the longest time. But what's your equivalent of this? Has this ever happened to you where one of your suppliers just simply can't supply the things that you've already ordered?
Well, yeah, we've had it twice with furniture suppliers. The first one was with Scottwood, a handmade kitchen manufacturer from Nottingham. Most expensive display in the showroom. Halfway through a 30-grand kitchen, went bust, couldn't complete it. We didn't at that point have an alternative source, but we were able to find one that was basically doing a lot of the manufacturing for Scottwood themselves. And they're a company we're still dealing with to this day. But the irony was that the subsequent one that dropped out on us was Lockwood, which was a bespoke handmade kitchen manufacturer that came out of the phoenix rising out of the ashes of Scottwood. So we got our fingers burnt twice by the same company there, basically.
You sort of skipped over there that you've sorted it out, but in the moment, the language that must come out of your mouth at that moment when you hear about it must be really quite fruity.
Well, yes, because you're halfway through a job. I mean, the bulk of it's already arrived, so in that circumstance, it wasn't such a major issue that we could crack on and still get a long way down the line. But it was remedials and some paid-to-order items that were late arriving, and obviously we found out after the event that the late arrival was due to the fact that there was no longer anybody in the factory.
You're the last to know, aren't you?
Well, yeah, that is the problem. You're the last to know. Yeah.
And what about over in bathrooms, Justine? Because lots of bathroom stuff comes in a box, if you know what I mean. And there's an awful lot of brands out there. A lot of them come from Europe, or there's lots of different places that come into the UK. Has this ever happened to you where someone just can't give you what you've already ordered?
Yes, but not from the same situations as like the Waterline issue, but more so where we promised new products will be available at a certain date and then they're not, and they push back and we've already sold something, or more so where something is the lead time has just been pushed out, or something's discontinued. We've had that where nobody knew it was discontinued until we placed an order. So we've had lots of little problems. We've never had a massive problem and we're really fortunate. But of course, we've only been going for 8 years. So one day I'm sure it'll happen. But for now, we've just been able to deal with those smaller issues rather than large ones.
Yeah, I mean, a big supplier going into administration is very rare, thankfully. But as you describe it, there's lots of other reasons why you've got to have some kind of contingency in place. As you say, discontinuation is another one. Just people having their supply chain mucked up means that they can't give it you when you want. Now, Nick, you must be having COVID flashbacks during this conversation, are you? Because that's the most recent example of a time when people just couldn't get hold of what it was they wanted to get hold of.
Yes, COVID was obviously prime example, and there was a big follow-on after that because the supply chain got that disrupted as a consequence, the global supply chain. So we found afterwards, we ended up being in a position where we were having to order in appliances that we'd had the luxury, I suppose, before COVID of just being able to fit in a kitchen on a Monday. You kind of order the appliances the Monday before and they turn up on time and everything's lovely. And then you end up in a situation where you've got a kitchen that's being fitted in 8 weeks' time and you still can't get the appliances in time. So yeah, there was a lot of lessons learned, I think, for us from that, but it also probably cost us quite a bit of money along the way, just in terms of resequencing of works and also taking on additional storage so that we had that capacity to get things earlier than we really needed them to ensure that we'd got that supply ready so that we could then hit an installation as we wanted to, rather than having empty spaces all around a kitchen with a customer using a plug-in induction hob from IKEA.
Okay, so let's put ourselves in that position and try and talk through what the kind of train of thought is for it. So when you've got a job, the orders have been placed, as Nick says, you're used to them just arriving on time. And when they don't, what do you do? What's your train of thought as an experienced retailer here? What do you step through first?
It's just, working through other alternatives. So we've looked at distributors, we've reached out to networks to see if anyone's during that COVID period, we forged some really good relationships because we were transferring stocked appliances between us and other retailers in the area, or just kind of doing swapsies. So that's kind of one thing. But more recently, we were in the process of agreeing a display with Multiwood, and we'd sold a number of their products when they went as well. So being partway through a job and having to find product that no one else made readily and sold door only was really tricky. So that was probably our most similar experience. But you've just got to phone around, remain resilient, use your resources and be open and have those conversations. It will get done. I just can't give you a date today.
One of the things that always fascinates me about how retailers work, because I don't have this kind of brain at all, is you are juggling an enormous logistical thing for each kitchen or bathroom that goes in. In an ideal world, your customer would order all one thing, all from the same person, and it'd be dead easy. But it doesn't. All these things arrive at different times from different places, and you've got to manage that logistics so that everything is there when it needs to be there on the same day, including the guy who's going to fit it needs to be there on that day too. And if one of those things falls down, if one bit of that disappears because it's out of your hands, how do you shuffle all that around so that you're not losing time or one job isn't rolling into another? How do you do that, Trevor?
Well, you've just summed up what it is to be a kitchen specialist or a bathroom specialist. This is what we do for a living, is project manage, looking at a whole rake of suppliers and making sure that we coordinate all of the orders taking place at the right time and the goods coming into stock at the right time so that we can deliver them all and then have the fitter on site at the appointed time and to install it. Liz has said it, the most recent time where it's fallen over massively was during COVID. And during that period, of course, we went from ordering appliances perhaps as little as 2 weeks prior to the due delivery date, whereas the furniture might have been ordered 6 or 8 weeks previously, to actually sort of like more or less the day the order had been placed by the client, we were slapping the order into, our case, BSH for the appliances, giving us sort of upwards of 6-8 weeks lead time on the appliances as well, in the hope that by the time we got close to the due delivery date, we'd gone from the red traffic light to the green traffic light. If we hadn't, then, if we were on amber, it's like, well, we've got a date, but the date's the wrong date. You go and have that hard conversation with the customer about what would they like us to do about it. Now, like Nick has alluded to, we had the freestanding induction hobs sat on the work surfaces. We had temporary ovens in slots that were loaned to us or given to us for being used for this purpose so that we could make sure that clients continue to be able to cook. And we tried to convince people to take alternative product, but such is the brand awareness of, in this particular example, Neff and the slide and hide oven, then they wanted to wait. And in some cases they were waiting months for the product that they'd originally ordered to arrive. And they did it incredibly stoically. Now, that was COVID. I'm sure if you have a supplier that goes down on you, then it's a slightly different scenario, because you're then the retailer and the buck stops with you, and it's down to you to sort the problem out. And under those circumstances, really, it's about dual sourcing as much as you possibly can do. Now, obviously, with supplier X's Model A oven, then that's it. You can't find an alternative to that. You've just got to see who's got it. And Liz has alluded to it. You do swapsies if you can. You'll phone up a local electrical retailer or even a distant one, and you'll see if they've got it and buy it from them, or arrange by the area manager to have a swapsy of it. And it does work. It does work.
How far does stoicism get you if you're trying to fit a bathroom, Justine? Because if you've ripped one out and you haven't got a toilet or a shower, then how far does that get you?
So I actually think it's much easier to swap and change in bathrooms than it is in kitchens. If, say, for example, we specified a toilet and the toilet is discontinued or out of stock, it is actually very easy to say to the customer the truth, and then we're going to upgrade you to the nearest model. It looks like this, and it's almost identical in some cases. So I do think it's actually much easier to address these issues in a bathroom than it is a kitchen. But as we've just been talking, I remembered during COVID, I had my own kitchen done by somebody, and I had it done in December 21, and they couldn't get me induction hob before Christmas, or an oven. They couldn't get me induction hob or an oven before Christmas. And they just gave me a huge upgrade on both, which I obviously accepted. And they got it in from Ireland for me, and they fitted it before Christmas. And I remember thinking, wow, that was like amazing service. And if anything like that ever happens with my customers, that's exactly what I'm going to do. And I don't know how much of it was that they knew I was in bathrooms round the corner, so they felt obliged, or whether they would have done that for anybody else. But yeah, I had a positive experience with a kitchen company during COVID for some of the things that you guys are talking about that you had on the flip side. Yeah.
It's funny, isn't it? Because last week's episode that you weren't there for, Justine, unfortunately, so welcome back, by the way.
Thanks.
Was about retailers working together. And actually, this is a really good example of times when retailers do work really well together. When you can just phone people up and saying, have you got one of them because we're short of one, is a really good example of the collaboration that we were looking for last week. I suppose maybe that should be formalised in some way, that there is a national network of that. But there we go. That's a different conversation for a different day. What this all sounds like to me, Nick, again, is it's terrifying the life out of me because I'm so disorganised. The hours that are consumed in just emailing and trying to keep track of things and making phone calls in one of these kind of situations, it must just suck so much time out of your day. Is that the biggest downfall of all this? It's just the sheer time it takes to sort it out.
For me, that is the biggest issue. You can ultimately resolve a problem with a client, and I think that we're pragmatists. We're not perfect all the time, and issues arise, and quite often it's how you respond to that issue that the client measures you against. So as long as they can see that you are taking a proactive approach and resolving the issue, 99% of the customers that I deal with are happy and allow us to get on with sorting things out. The problem arises for us is that there are only so many hours in the day. We're running multiple jobs at any one time. And so if you are pulled into dealing with an issue that really shouldn't be taking a lot of time, it's taking your time away from other things that are productive, and that there's no payback for that. Distributors, suppliers are very reluctant to acknowledge that there's been any loss to you because of that, because they don't measure it as a financial loss as you would, an oven or some doors, but it's your time, and time for us is probably the most valuable thing that we've got. And so, coming out of COVID, it was just horrendous. The hours I was working after that just to keep things afloat was just shocking. And it's nice that it's calmed down since then. And I know I've moved over, so the suppliers that I use, I tend to focus on ones where they've got pretty robust forward ordering arrangements, so you can order stuff when you get the job, but it's not delivered in until X days before you actually start the job. So I'm not bombed out with stuff that I don't actually need for 6 weeks. So that helps manage things. But if you're not careful, when you get drawn into an issue that on the face of it appears fairly minor, it can grow arms and legs, and it starts using time. I've got a job on at the moment where we've got an issue with a door from a supplier. Doors have been replaced twice, still not satisfactory to either myself or the client. We're having to involve a sales manager in coming out and having a look at that. I've had to go to site 3 times already in order to maintain a relationship with the client and show that we're doing things. And that's all time that, even when the issue is ultimately resolved, I'm not going to get compensated for that. That's a cost to the business, where realistically there was better things that I could have been doing with my time other than pointing out defects in doors that should have been picked up by quality control.
Well, Liz, let's pick up on that, because the finances of this is really interesting, because of course you costed a job out with certain products, and you've done that very, very carefully with your client, and they know exactly what they've got to pay and when. And then suddenly a spanner gets thrown in the works where you've got to find other products, new products. Does that completely screw your margin up? How do you keep on top of whether you're going to make any money out of this?
I mean, it varies. So sometimes if we result into having to buy online or go to a manufacturer that we've not worked with before, we don't necessarily get the same kind of margins in that, which becomes problematic. I think the time is a big issue, because it means that you end up working weekends and evenings, and with the whole thing about people trying to go down to a completely different conversation, I appreciate, but 4 days a week, I mean, that just blows my mind. I'd like to do 5 days a week or evenings, and just that how it just sucks out the time, the money, the enjoyment. I mean, we have customer service and project manager here who do all of that theoretically independently for us, but it still has involvement. Even if you've got employees who are doing it, is this the right thing? Should I be doing that? What have I not considered? It takes a lot from a lot of different people, which never gets reimbursed. And then it's the constant conversations and reassurance with the client that you are on top of it, you haven't forgotten them, you're not walking away from it. That all takes time as well. And then reputation, and they come in on a Saturday while you're presenting, grumbling. It's that whole kind of management that you have to kind of always be on top of as well, should you get yourself into that kind of situation.
The way you all talk about it, quite rightly and understandably, is it's the service to the customer. It's always the customer that has to be kept informed. You have to keep them sweet. They've got to know exactly what's going on. You've got to answer all their questions. You've got to fess up to them when something's gone wrong. But invariably, and this is certainly the case in COVID, but it's certainly the case when companies go bust as well, the communication that comes to you from your supplier just seems to completely disappear or completely erode. The biggest complaint I always hear from retailers is we just didn't know what was going on. And I suspect there's a lot of that going on right now. This seems right up your alley, this one. Trevor, what do you think? The supplier's communication is the bit that causes the most grief.
Absolutely. I mean, I suppose there's a strong argument that says if we don't know the answer to the question, then we're not going to give you a waffle as an answer. But communication is king. And even if the answer is we don't know, we'll get back to you in another 72 hours, is better than radio silence and nobody answering their phones, because that just leads to all sorts of head games that are going on, wondering what on earth is happening. And that if there's one takeaway from this that I would say to all suppliers listening in is, for Christ's sake, just talk to us. Talk to us early in the cycle when something's going down the toilet for whatever that reason might be. Keep us in the picture, keep us in the loop, so that we're aware. And it's incredibly frustrating when you're finding out third hand. Maybe sometimes you're finding out via you, Andy, what's going on, rather than via the direct source of communication that you should be from a sales director or a business manager or a regional manager. Yeah, very frustrating.
What do you think, Justine? Do you find yourself chasing sales managers around the country, trying to work out what the hell's going on?
Yes, mainly it's if something is out of stock, they actually can get back to us pretty quickly about that, because there's distributors, there's other people in the chain. That all seems to be fine, although we do have to do a lot of chasing. But it's if we usually have that problem if something has gone wrong in terms of like a problem on site with like a faulty product, or we've had some disasters where we've had like a bath just completely split in half like a year after it's been fitted whilst it's full of water. That's when people tend to disappear a little bit, because it's often a larger problem than just, I'll just send you a new sink, I'll just send you a new tap. There's other issues that have to be addressed in. It is sad that we have to deal with those alone and the support isn't there. But I also understand, you can be really, really up to your eyeballs, and just imagine getting a phone call from a retailer. Oh, this has happened. You could be anywhere in the country doing anything, dealing with any other problem. So I do understand, but I do think there has to be somebody, a representative of that company, even if it's somebody you don't know, that takes the bull by the horns. Because how can we say to the customer, oh, your shower screen has just exploded and you're injured, but we can't get hold of anybody and there's nobody to speak to? Like, you have to speak to somebody. So yeah, it's frustrating, but mainly that frustration for me is around faults on site, like faulty products. That's when people disappear.
Was someone in the bath when it split in half, full of water?
No, fortunately, that would have been so much worse. Imagine that. No, I've had two composite baths split in half. One high end and one low end. Completely split in half, full of water, both of them.
Width-wise or length-wise?
It's always around the waist, and
right.
one split one way and one split the other way. Yeah, it was crazy. Full of water, both of them.
I'm laughing, and I shouldn't be laughing. That's awful.
Oh, I know it. That's exactly what it was. What happened though? It came. All the water came through the ceiling. You know, we had loads of things. I had a lady the other day, very elderly lady. She had 3 bathrooms from us, and her shower screen just exploded in the middle of the night, which isn't rare. That can happen. But yeah, she phoned me and she said, I'm at home alone. She's like in her 80s. My shower screen exploded at like 1 a.m. I thought someone was in the house. And I was like, oh, how am I going to deal with this?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
But I'm also thinking she's 80, lives on her own, but's got 3 bathrooms.
Yeah, she's a nice lady.
Yeah. So anyway, okay, so that's like the short-term issues of trying to deal with one of these kind of problems. But obviously it's a longer-term issue that if a supplier's just disappeared for whatever reason, or you decided you're not going through that again, that you've then got a display in the showroom that is from that supplier, and then you've got to deal with that too. What happens then, Nick?
That's problematic for us in that, again, we end up having to carry the can for placing that item. For us, that's looking at the relationships we've got. We're a doors and cabinets business, so it's a question of dealing with the suppliers and arranging a replacement product. But it is frustrating because if you've invested time and money in putting a display in, the cost of replacing it sooner than you want to is an additional cost that you've not allowed for. It's all about the fact there's a material cost of the item, but it's also finding a window within your fitting schedule to pull a fitter away from that and to be in the showroom instead of actually generating your money out installing a customer's kitchen, of actually taking the existing one out, putting the new one in, getting new tops in. I've just done some refurbishment in the showroom on a couple of displays, and it's amazing how much time that takes away from other areas within the business. We try and do it at a point in time during the year where we're naturally quieter anyway. But it's still upheaval and you have to deal with it. And for us, particularly because we're only a small showroom, if you've got a display that's dated or isn't available anymore, it's probably more noticeable because we've got so few displays actually within our showroom.
But what happened to you, Trevor, when your furniture guys went under? How quickly did you have that display out and put another one in, and how difficult was that?
Yeah, well, in the case of the most recent one with Lockwood going down, then it took about 3 months to sell the display. Unfortunately, a builder client of ours pretty much built a room in his house that was the right shape and size to take the display that he'd lusted after since the day we'd installed it. So it was quite handy, but it still took time. And then you've got the whole process of remodeling and redesigning the space, choosing the product that you're going to put back into it, getting it ordered, finding the installation slots that are free to be able to install it. I reckon you're probably looking at easily 6 months from point of deciding to change a display to actually getting the old one out and the new one in. In some cases, even longer. You know, some of the remodeling we've done in the main showroom in recent years has involved perhaps selling as much as 3 different displays in order to recreate a different space, a different shape altogether, to put one much bigger room set in. Because that certainly is the way designing in showrooms has gone in more recent years, is to have much more expansive sets rather than little bijou, small examples, cameo sets. So it's evolved, quite a long protracted process to get a new display in. In the case of discontinuations, the Germans are classics for this. I mean, we'll go over to the Kitchen Mile in September. We'll see a range of new doors and styles that they're introducing that are available from January 1. We'll start the process of selling a display. It might not go until March. We've then got perhaps 6 weeks before it actually goes out of the showroom. We've ordered the replacement. The new one comes in. We're already into midsummer, getting on for 8-9 months beyond the point where we saw that original new design before it gets installed. And then we go to the next kitchen master says, oh yeah, that didn't work, that one. We've discontinued it. And it's literally brand new. It's sort of like the paint's still drying on it.
Let's just sort of round this up a little bit with what lessons you can learn from all this kind of thing. Because as Nick said, I think everyone had got a bit used to just in time. And that if you order things, it was always going to be there. And particularly COVID kind of made everybody look at their supply chain a little bit, I suspect. So do you have contingency plans like knowledgeably in place? Do you have alternative suppliers that you just sort of keep an account open with just in case? What about you, Justine? Do you have just in case accounts? Just in case. I'm sorry, I'm not doing that deliberately.
Yeah, of course. And I think you have to, and I think that you should. But the biggest contingency for us is just having funds available to be able to rectify a problem no matter how much it costs and then worry about it later. You have to have accounts that are backup accounts. And I think you just have to protect yourself and in turn your customer.
Yeah, that's exactly. I'm very much with Justine on that. We have a contingency fund that is available if we need to call on it. And there is a tension for smaller independents between having that contingency and also being able to negotiate better discounts with your suppliers because you're putting more business their way. So on the one hand, you're trying to streamline your supply chain because that gives you better terms with your product. But on the other, you need to keep your options open enough so that if for whatever reason that relationship isn't working for you or the supply is not there, that you have got a plan B that you can move on to. And that's what I certainly try to do, is that, I've got appliances in the showroom where there's now, even though it's a small showroom, we've got some appliances from a different channel so that if we have similar supply issues again, I'm not as hamstrung perhaps as I was previously. And again, with the door suppliers, although we got a couple of, one or two main suppliers, I've got accounts with other suppliers again, so that if I need to, I can turn in an alternative direction. And I think that's really important. But it's very difficult because you've got those accounts open, but you're not actually operating them very much. So it's trying to maintain that relationship and continuously monitoring whether you're getting the service from your main supplier and seeing whether they continue to justify that being the correct position for them, or whether you really should be giving the others a bit more opportunity. And that's the difficulty, because we're just not big enough, for instance, to have two big suppliers running side by side, which perhaps you would be able to do if we were a larger showroom doing more kitchens. It's a difficult balance to strike sometimes.
Liz, when you're looking at a new supplier, do you ever check to see how sort of financially robust they are? Do you do any sort of background checks on suppliers at all?
We normally go to suppliers that have been recommended via people we meet at events, but I'm married to an accountant, so it's built into me to kind of check companies' house and the directors and stuff. So that is something that I do. I don't know if that's, something across the board. I think it should be. It seems quite sensible.
I guess if it's a company you've never heard of, that's one thing. But if it's a big brand or a big supplier, I mean, Waterline are one of the biggest in the market.
I think it's just as important. I mean, if you look at how stable some of us as independents are versus some of the national companies, just because they're bigger doesn't mean that they're more fluid or stable or don't have someone at the top who just pulls out, and all of that uncertainty. So yeah, it doesn't matter on the size of the business. That doesn't tell you anything really.
Do you check, Trev?
Honestly, no. If they've got a product that we want, then we'll buy it from them. Sometimes these failures, they come out of left field completely unexpectedly as well. A company that might look substantively really strong based on the previous year's books, even if you did take a cursory glance at them, and that information is actually there on Companies House, and sort of finding that out sometimes isn't that straightforward, because there's all sorts of corporations and back companies that are quite often behind these organisations. Just because they look good last year doesn't mean that they're good this year. If they've had a bad run, cash flow's killed them. That's the end of it. That quite often is the case.
We've got to round this up, I think, but I'd be more inclined to think that most retailers would probably do what you do, Trevor, as opposed to what you do, Liz. Maybe more of them should marry accountants. I don't know. Maybe that's the solution. We should start some kind of matchmaking service. Let's face it, accountants probably need it.
Yeah.
It's not the sexiest of professions, is it?
No, really not.
No. But maybe that is something we should do a little bit more on, is how do you check out whether your suppliers are robust or not? But look, that's a whole different subject. Look, let's wrap this up. Thank you so much. Again, this is a very difficult thing to talk around when something's happening so immediately. And there are lots of people who are trying to deal with all this very stuff right now. And just hearing other people talk about experiences they've had, I think is really useful. So look, thank you so much, and we'll see you all next week.
Okay,
See you next week.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye-bye.